Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Johanna Walker. She is a fear-blasting storytelling maven for coaches, consultants, leaders, and changemakers. She's the founder of Women Who Speak, a transformational speaker coaching program for female leaders, and she's the co-founder and co-host of Boulder, Colorado's popular bi-monthly Story Slam series, Truth Be Told. In addition to her work as a speaker and coach, Johanna has written and performed solo theater pieces that she's toured throughout the US and Canada. She holds a Master's of Education from Kent State University, an MFA from Naropa University, and is a certified whole public speaking coach. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
So one of the things that drew me into this work that you're doing was listening to your talk, The Long Drink of Water. It was one about your story with not having children and the grief that came with that. And it was a very powerful performance seeing you on the stage and delivering this talk. And I wonder if you could tell us first, just a little bit about that time in your life and realizing that there was this grief that wanted to be felt. And then I'd love to hear more about just your crafting that talk and the vulnerability and working up to share it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that time in my life, I share more about it in my talk, just the pathway up to that, growing up as a young person, always assuming that I was going to get married and have babies. Like that was the way. That was what I expected would happen in my life. I thought it was automatic. And I grew up with this, that was my belief. Because everybody said, when you grow up and have kids of your own, you'll understand this is what will happen, and this will be your perspective of the world. And I just thought that's what happened. Girls grow up to be women, become moms, and have children. And I thought that was the automatic pathway. And meanwhile, I'm living a big life. I'm doing creative work. I'm traveling. I'm following my bliss. I'm following my passion. I'm starting a business and doing, just following my heart. And all along thinking, as I started to approach 40, all along assuming one day I'm going to have kids, because that was just so how it was laid out for me. And then as I started approaching 40, I think, maybe that's not going to happen. Interesting. And this intellectual awareness of, okay, well, that would be okay if I didn't have kids. There would be some grief to feel. There would be a letting go. And that'll be fine. So I got that on an intellectual level, but then my life kept moving forward, clearly not on that path, making choices that took me in a different direction. And then when I hit 45, 46, and it became really clear, this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to have kids of my own. It just really knocked me over. It was grief I didn't expect. Like I said, I had this intellectual understanding that I would feel some grief, but when I actually got to that place, it was really shocking. There was a level of shock and devastation, and it was hard to imagine my life, even though I had had a really good and interesting and full life without children, when it became clear that that wasn't going to happen in my future, it was hard to imagine my life without children and my future without children and growing old without children and not getting to have those relationships and not getting to be a parent and not getting to do all the things I thought I would do. It was stunning, the grief. And then also, it was like finding meaning. That possibility always was how I would find meaning in my life. And to have to find meaning without that was it set me on this whole other path. So that was a pretty intense time of hopelessness and fear and, just like not wanting to, and some resentment and anger, not wanting to hear anything about other people and their children. And, just a lot of bitterness and anger and grief. Bitterness and anger that came along with the grief. And I think that, as I talk about in the talk, it was really being able to show up for the grief and do the full, just like feel everything, that was what allowed me to transform that and step on a new path that has been really powerful, and so many gifts, and really connecting to a different place of power and a different place of meaning and a different place of what it means to be a woman and what it means to how to show up in the world, really honoring my story and really honoring my path and really trusting my choices.
Yeah. There is power in the acceptance and allowing and moving forward and seeing, sometimes life doesn't turn out the way exactly what we thought we would. And actually, a lot of the grief is probably letting go of the idea of what we thought would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think this is a topic actually that it's not talked about very much. And did you find that sense of isolation and was that part of your desire to actually start talking about it and help support other women who may be going through the same?
Yeah, definitely. I felt very alone with it. Like it was kind of my own private grief. And I had allies and friends and support, certainly, but there was a way in which I felt shame. There was shame and embarrassment that came with it, because especially from women and mothers, this pity and this disappointment and feeling sorry and, oh, that must be so horrible. And, there was a lot that got projected on me from other people's expectation of what it means to be a woman and what makes you a complete woman, and, to not get to have that love. And so I got a lot of that disappointment projected on me, which made me want to keep it private, and it was amazing how much of it came from other women. And it was being able to, as I speak about in the talk, there's a talk that I heard by another woman, Jody Day, who has been very, she has a similar story and really launched forward in this big path of supporting other women and who don't have children for whatever reason, by choice or by circumstance. And hearing her talk, I heard a talk that she gave, and it was just like that was where the title, The Long Drink of Water, came, because it was like hearing her speak so publicly and so openly about her story, just like this door opened of connection and community, and really seeing that it wasn't my private grief, that I really was part of this collective grief and this collective story. And to see my story in that context, in that larger pool of grief and that larger pool of truth that so many women are holding, was such a balm for me. And really allowed me to, like, the power of hearing her talk to me, like the impact of her talk on me, made it clear that I needed to tell my story also, because somebody would benefit. Somebody would benefit. And, in service of growing this community and deepening this pool and connecting to this collective and, really nurturing the collective, not holding it as a private thing, but really nurturing the collective. Mm-hmm. That was what became so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Was telling the story then part of the healing and part of the coming out of that grief? And also what else was, I'm curious, just you mentioned feeling the grief and feeling the pain, but what else helped you during that time to start to turn the tables?
Yeah, I would say feeling the grief, certainly showing up for it in a very deeply embodied way, not alone, pulling in my sisters, pulling in my allies, pulling in other women who had similar stories, and pulling in my movement practices, just so that I could, I think that a lot of our wisdom and knowing lives in our bodies, and grief and rage lives in our bodies. And so a big part of the transformation happens through our bodies. So, it was showing up for my movement practices so that my body could be fully on board with the grief and fully on board with the healing, fully on board with the transformation. And then I think the other piece of that was really connecting to gratitude and celebration and noticing and honoring what is full and abundant in my life. Just all the richness in my life and the richness in my relationships. And that, I've really been able to invest fully in a lot of relationships with young people who aren't my children, but that I have deep relationships with a handful of young people that I know I would not have been able to have the same quality of relationship if I had been a parent. And I so cherish those relationships, and I know they and their parents cherish their relationships with me. So it's really being able to celebrate and connect with the gratitude of that. And then I think also connecting with the revolutionary power of being a woman who doesn't marry and who doesn't, part of the not having children was about not having a partner. It was about not wanting to do it alone. Mm-hmm. And although I've had partners, I've had relationships, like I've never landed in a lifetime commitment. And so it's like being a woman without a partner, unmarried woman without a partner, without children, is a revolutionary act. And really connecting to that story and being able to be a role model for young women. It's like, that's not the only way. For me, that was the message, that was the only way to be a complete woman, was to get married and have babies. And to really stand in that identity with, just with the holding the whole picture, the big picture of women and liberation. That's been just an interesting way to connect with my story. It's like, oh, there's something revolutionary about this.
Yes. And I imagine that your work, who knows, maybe or maybe not, would be where it is today if you had gone down that path of being a mother. But just that creative force, that life force that moves through us, and how you were able to channel that in all these ways, and being a teacher and giving so much of yourself.
Yeah.
It was also sounds like something that unfolded.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things is not, one of the practices is not comparing paths, like, oh, I didn't have a kid, and so this path is better. Like, it's not about comparing that this is better than what would have happened. Mm-hmm. It's just what happened. It's the path I walked. It's the path I'm on, and being able to really show up and celebrate what I am doing without getting hooked into comparing it to what I might have done.
Yeah.
you know? So that's one piece of it. And yeah, being able to really show up for it. And while most of my adult life I have been making my own way, teaching workshops, doing creative projects, it's really only in the last 6 or 7 years that I have fully invested in and taken on being a business owner
Mm.
and building a business that supports my creativity and that really lets me go to my own edge and show up for myself in a big way and take risks and clarify my message and really hone in on how I can be of service and
Mm-hmm.
how I can support people. And that has been so fun,
Mm-hmm.
really fun and
Yeah.
exciting and surprising. And, I just feel my kind of like my ninja self just honing. I'm just like honing and sharpening my genius. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is something to look forward to just as we are continuing to grow older and wiser and have more confidence in ourselves and have that sense of maturity of like, yeah, this is what I stand for and this is what I'm going after.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know storytelling is something that you teach a lot to help other people who want to um, public speak, share their message. Can you tell us about the power of story and how you encourage people to use that?
Yeah. I think there is so much power in the stories we tell on many levels. I always say, a story is the shortest distance between two people. And it's hard to dislike somebody or be angry when you've really, really heard their story, that we're all on a path doing our best. And, we get to a certain place because of the story that we've lived. And so I over and over witnessed the power of sharing our stories. And I think it's powerful, one, on a very, very personal level, that we make sense of our lives by the way we tell our stories and the way we frame our stories. That I could tell my story of not having children very, very differently. I could tell it in a very disempowering way. And the way that I tell it, the way that I frame it just for myself, is very personally powerful and transformational. So on a personal level, I think it's very powerful. But the reason ultimately telling my story in a public way on a public stage is not really about me. It's not about me. And that's been a huge lesson for me. And that I'm always connecting with my, sharing this, inviting my clients into this relationship with their story, that it's not about you, that we tell our stories to open doors for our audience. And it's about what's at the heart of the story. What's the gift of the story? What's the parable of the story, the teaching of the story? Not in sort of a didactic teaching way, but that inherent in the story is a transformation. And by me sharing that, that invites you into, that invites you to open a doorway into your own story and your own journey and your own transformation. And so it really is a gift. And so I think for a lot of people, shifting, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to talk about myself, or it's too much about me, 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 me. But I think shifting the perspective that it's really not about you. In telling your story, it's truly a gift. It's truly a gift. And it's about that connection, and it's about the invitation, the door that you open for your listener.
Mm.
And so I was going to say that cuts through for many people. That's a way to cut through the fear. Like when you get a fear, the fear that comes up for so many people around speaking, around being vulnerable, around showing up and telling your story, that fear that shows up, once you can shift into that, it's not about me, it's about the gift, it's about the person in the audience who's going to be touched and impacted by my story. It's about her pathway and the next door that she needs to open. And shifting into that perspective for me has been just like slices through any of that fear and any of that stuff that gets in the way of standing in our power and telling our stories.
Yes, I so agree. And has public speaking always come naturally to you?
No, no, it hasn't. Um, I was a super quiet, shy, terrified, invisible, hiding in the back of the room girl, just like super to the bone. Whatever I could do to keep myself invisible, to not be noticed, to not be called to the front of the room, to not have to answer a question in front of other people. I did everything I could to keep my invisibility cloak on. That was my mission. My mission was to get the right answer, to figure out how to get the right answer. It wasn't about showing myself or sharing my genius or my creativity or my thinking or my curiosity. It was about getting the right answer. And if I didn't have the right answer, if I wasn't 100% sure that I had the right answer, then I didn't speak. And I would sometimes go for days without speaking. And I was through all that time always a writer. I had stacks and stacks of journals. So I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And once I started sharing that, it was through poetry. It was in the poetry world that I started actually reading my poems out loud in public. Had an opportunity to read a poem out loud. And it was just like hearing my voice in the microphone. brought me to my knees, connecting to my own power and feeling the resonance of connection with the audience was so palpable and powerful and profound. Mm-hmm. And it also helped me see, I do have something to say. I have a story to tell. Because I had such a story of I have nothing to say. I have nothing of value to say, so I'm not going to say it. But really feeling that connection and, have other women walked up to me after that poem and said, thank you so much. That's my story too. And again, speaking my story connected me to the collective and helped me see that I wasn't alone and helped me see my power. So, once I started doing through poetry, when I started getting up to a microphone, I was always good at, even though it was terrifying, I always knew how to hold a room. I knew how to connect with a room. I think because I had been in such a place of staying in the background, quietness, something about that allowed me to show up in the microphone and just tell my story. And so when I started speaking through poetry, it was by reading my poems, I had this presence and this way of connecting that worked for me. And that's really how it's been a windy path to get to this place of coaching. Mm-hmm. But once I got myself to the microphone, I was good. I could own a room.
Yeah.
I could connect. But many, many, many years, I did everything I could to stay away from the microphone.
Yes. I really relate to your story. I was just so me, that quiet girl, just like, I'm not going to say anything unless I know it's 100% right. Mm-hmm. And I find now, actually, because teaching yoga is what brought me out of my shell. And it was that connection to service that, wow, I have healed myself of chronic pain. I want to help other people with this. I need to put my ego aside and just deliver the teachings. Something I find now actually is I almost would prefer having that all eyes on me or being the teacher or the one speaking than entering into a party or a social situation where no one knows me and I'm having to meet all these new people, because in a way it's so interesting, because even though I might be more on the quiet or shy side sometimes, when all eyes are on me and there is that sense of I have something to give and I can hold that space in the room, then it opens a space where people will just come up to me and I don't have to start the conversations. And there's just this sense of ease of like, okay, people know who I am and I've shared my soul and now I can feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. And I'm certainly getting better, but for me, I was way more comfortable on stage than in a social situation or in a group discussion, just like finding a way to interject my voice was always really hard. But being on stage, once I got myself to the stage, was very comfortable. And I think, everybody has their comfort zone and their risk zone and everybody has a way they got silenced, but I totally resonate with that. I get it. And for me, being on stage is about permission. There's something about permission that everybody has agreed it's my turn to talk.
Yes.
And so when I get to the microphone, everybody is there. They've agreed it's my turn to talk. I don't have to try to make my way through through into the conversation or through the noise. It's like, okay, we have this agreement now. It's my turn to talk, so you're going to listen to me. And something about that permission has really made it, a lot more comfortable for me to be on stage than at the party.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I wanted to ask you about, so a lot of speakers tend to have charisma and that real sense of presence. Do you feel like that is something that can be learned? And what are your thoughts on those qualities, like the qualities of a great speaker?
Yeah, I think it can be learned. It can be learned because I think it's the stuff, I believe that naturally we want to connect with one another and we want to show ourselves and we want to shine. Like that's our instinct is really to shine and to be connected and to show ourselves and to expect love and expect connection. And so much happens just from the culture and, that makes us kind of clamp down and stuff our brilliance and try to fit in service of fitting in service of being professional, in service of trying to get it right, in service of so many things that aren't about our genius. And I just totally blanked on the question.
The charisma.
The charisma. Oh, right. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is not so much about learning charisma, but about undoing the stuff that got laid on us and reconnecting to our natural genius and our natural brilliance and our, the light that shines inside of us just by being human and just by being ourselves. So I think it's a lot. I do a program called the Speaker's Playground, and it's a lot about undoing. It's about that undoing. It's not as much about learning how do you be charismatic, but how do you undo the stuff that has separated you from your brilliance and that light inside. And I think a lot of that is about the way that it happens is through practice. It's showing up and practicing and getting out of your comfort zone and trying stuff and being willing to take risks, being willing to show yourself, being willing to kind of push through the rigidity of the patterns to create some new ones that have more space for your genius and more space for your brilliance and more space for that light that wants to shine.
Yeah.
It wants to shine.
Yeah. And I think also really important to find those safe spaces starting out and that encouragement. I'm just thinking about a friend that I have who was very shy to share her songs a few years ago. She wrote these incredible songs, and if over a period of time, there was a few months where she shared the song with like 2 or 3 people. And then we were just like, that's an amazing song. We all wanted to sing it together. And so anytime there was a gathering or a birthday party or something, we'd be like, Mackenzie, can you sing that song? And so then we'd all sing it together. And then slowly it was like more and more people started hearing her sing. And now she's like sang in front of hundreds of people. And it's just so amazing to see the build up and the positive feedback that can help us get to that next level.
Yeah, definitely. The other program I do is called Women Who Speak, and I work with a small group of women where we dive really deep into uncovering your message and crafting your story and telling, connecting your story to the heart of your message. It's not just the story. It's really, again, it's about the gift. It's about what's the deeper message. And we go through this process, and it's a lot about, and the program ends where each woman gets to deliver her talk in front of a public audience. I produce an event where they get on stage and deliver their talk. And most people who come to me have a passion to speak, like they know they have a story to tell and a message that will have an impact. But getting to that stage is pretty scary. But to be able to do that journey in a small group of women that is safe and a place where you can take risks and try stuff and make mistakes and kind of dig around in there and watch the birth of that talk with this team, then by the time they get on the stage, it's so beautiful and inspiring to get to witness that birthing, that stepping onto the stage and really claiming your power and your voice, but coming from a place of really deep safety as a foundation. Then, once you get on stage, because when you're speaking on stage, you're pretty much alone up there. But I think to get to do the work in community and in the collective, then it's like, oh, you can bring that whole collective behind you when you're up on stage delivering your talk.
Yes. What do you think makes a talk memorable? And there's something that I read about what you do is like finding their genie gem. What is that? And what is the making this talk memorable with that?
Yeah, I think that the genie gem is really the one thing. It's the one big idea. It's, most of us have like 5 million things we want to say. Once we start digging around, it's like, oh, there's what, we discover a lot that we want to say. And I always say, the less you say, the more they'll hear. And being able to really dig down to the heart, to the essence of your talk and keep it simple but powerful, that's when it really lands. That's when people hear it, when they're able to really remember one thing rather than all the 5 million things. That's when it sticks. That's a memorable talk, is being able to knowing what to weed out so the heart of your message can really flourish. And I think, so I think that's one thing that makes a strong talk, is really being able to get that clarity of what's the one thing. Can you boil it down to one thing you want your audience to hear? And then I think another piece is really truth and vulnerability, and being able to tell the hard stories, like the story that feels too personal or too edgy or too risky is probably a story that is going to deeply touch somebody else. That somebody else is holding onto their story that's too personal or too edgy or too risky or too intense. If you're willing to tell yours, that's going to awaken something for them. And so those are the talks that move me. But I think it's important that it's not like you have to tell a traumatic story, or it has to be intense, or it has to be, big drama. Like I always encourage, when I'm working with people, it's like, we want to get to the place that we can have some perspective, like to tell a vulnerable story, yes, but to not swim around inside the tragedy of it, that I'm actually able to step outside of it and have perspective, that I can look at the challenge or the struggle or the transformation and be able to say, oh, here are the gifts from it. That's really important. And again, the vulnerability doesn't have to be dramatic or tragic. It can also be very playful and humorous and creative. And there are a lot of ways to be vulnerable and to show yourself. So that, to me, is what makes it memorable, when you're really, really, really willing to show up 100% with breath and body and heart and voice as yourself, and let me in on what it's like to be you. You know, when you stand in that without apology, that to me is a powerful talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate this, what you shared about having some distance and perspective from the hard thing or whatever happened. Mm-hmm. I found that to be true. I published a memoir last year, and it was about my travels through India. And it was about a time in my life when I was 22, 23. And I started writing the book at that time, but it actually took 7 years to feel comfortable and ready, and to finish writing it and to come back to it and to share it from a place of, yeah, this is what happened. And there's some very vulnerable and personal stories and shares in that book. And to have enough of that perspective. And also, I'll just say too, what you said before about being able to reflect on your own story, like, and to make sense of it and to pull out a parable and a teaching from it. Mm-hmm. That was so amazing and healing for the just going through, kind of like re-evaluating and dissecting and overviewing and reflecting and learning from what happened. And I imagine just the similarity in crafting the talk in that way. Yeah, pulling those important stories.
Yeah. Like I said, it's healing and powerful on a very personal level and for the collective. I think when we can tap into both of those levels of truth and transformation, that's when it's really magic.
Yes. Well, do you have any last tips around the fear of public speaking? Because I know this prevents so many people from telling their story, getting on the stage. The intense feeling that we have before doing something like that can feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Why would I ever do this? So any other tips around just being with the fear and the intensity of public speaking?
Well, I think just what you said, being with it, being with the fear, and being willing to show up for it rather than run from it or try to stuff it or try to make it go away. My goal is not to make the fear go away. When I work with my clients, it's not to make the fear go away. That's not the goal. But the goal is to learn how to show up for it and actually welcome it and be curious about it. And, I often say curiosity is going to get you way further than confidence. So to really be curious about your fear, and rather than problematize it, I think a lot of people get stuck in making the fear a problem. So rather than problematizing it, celebrate it and welcome it and be curious about it and receive it as sensation.
So I know that you have an offering for the people listening, and I wonder if you could tell us just about this this gift that you have for everyone and where they can find it.
It's a recording of a class that helps people who want to speak, people who have a message, I call them the three things necessary for a powerful client attracting talk. So yeah, it takes you through these three things and some exercises. And I'd love to share that. It's with your listeners. It's johannawalker.com/rising women leaders. I'm sure you can share that link. But
Yes.
yeah, it's great. It's kind of helps you dig in to find the story and how to craft the narrative arc of the story and how to connect your story to the message. So it takes you through that process. So I'd love to share that with your listeners.
Thank you so much. And just tell us anything else you're excited about in your business or anything else coming up.
Well, I'm super excited that I'm going to be giving a TEDx talk in a couple of weeks. So I suspect by the time this airs, I will have already done it. Hopefully I will survive that. But I'm really excited about that. I have coached a lot of people on TEDx talks. This is my first TEDx talk. So I'm, really excited about that. And I'm just excited to be I spoke a little bit about my retreat mastermind for women called Women Who Speak. I'm just excited to really hone in on that. I'm offering it again this spring, and it's just such a luscious opportunity for me to work with a small group of women on really honing and clarifying and delivering their story, their talk, their message. So I'm super excited about getting to do that again.
Mm. And do you know what your TEDx talk topic will be?
I do. Yeah. The title is Where Stories Live, Honoring the Body's Wisdom.
Mm.
And it's about the stories that live in our bodies and how, basically how when we stop sucking our bellies in, we'll actually dismantle the patriarchy. So
can't wait to find that
it's
on
just a
YouTube.
lot of how it'll be there. It'll be there. So it's about, a lot of the work I do is very physical, is very somatic, and so much of the wisdom that we carry is in our bodies. So I believe when we get stuck in hating on and judging and trying to fix our bodies, trying to make us right, trying to make our bodies right, that is actually cutting ourselves off from our power and our stories. And so I think showing up in our bodies in a bigger way is a big step towards liberation. Not just personal liberation, but again, the collective, that the choices we make personally actually impact the collective.
Well, it's wonderful work that you're doing. I'm so grateful. I wonder if you have any closing words before I close up this conversation with a short prayer.
Yeah, I think just go for it. If you feel the call to speak, then answer the call. Answer the call, because I promise that it will touch somebody. It will make an impact in somebody's life. And that's how we change the world. That's how we change the world. And so whatever story you might be telling yourself about your message doesn't have value, I say follow it, speak it, share it, let it shine.
So I'll just invite everyone listening to take a moment to close their eyes and to just let that message sink in. For all of the people out there who have this calling, this little inkling, this desire to share themselves, to share their voice, to share their stories, just know that that seed is there for a reason, and that it's something that you can water and nurture and allow to grow, and that you don't have to do it alone. That so many other people, even just within the community of this podcast, are here to encourage and support you. So I'll just bring my hands to my heart and just thanking Johanna for being here today, sharing her wisdom with us. Thank you. And to all of you listening for showing up and being curious and being willing to go into those edgy places to uplift all of us. And namaste. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.